And this is View from the Pew, and we have our returning friendly atheist guest, Christian Beck, today.
Welcome to The View from a Pew, a conversation among Christians who are out to grow their faith by asking the simple questions, the tough questions, and the stuff you really wish your pastor would talk about. Come on now, let's reason together. It's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so join the conversation. Call 244-0077. That's 244-0077. Now here's your host, J. Michael McCoy.
And good afternoon. This is View from the Pew, and I'm your host, Frank Holzhauser. And joining me today is Christian Beck. And as always, this can be heard on The Truth 99.3, and that's powered by webcast1live.com. Well, we're going to hit just a couple, 3 or 4 of the top headlines in the news today. And apparently the White House fence jumper several months ago pleads guilty to 2 charges today. And calm is actually prevailing in Ferguson, Missouri after the shooting of 2 police officers the other night. And in an about-face, Sweden is offering to question Julian Assange in London. And North Korea fires 7 surface-to-air missiles into the sea, and you put it quite candidly, they can at least hit water now.
Yeah, well, we at least know that. So if you're a fish swimming out there somewhere in the North Pacific, keep your eyes open.
And one other small news I would mention is Hillary Clinton and her ongoing email scandals. Apparently, the State Department, one of their ambassadors to Kenya, got canned for the same issue of having a private server. So we'll see in the months to come about how Hillary does with her email scandals. Well, that's the news for today. Well, Christian, I sent you a email or a Facebook message the other night, and I kind of give you the heads up on what we would be discussing. Before we get started, I just want to kind of mention, in the interest of disclosure, Christian and I kind of had a previous history before we actually got to know one another. He actually used to hear me on Bradshaw's show, probably back in 2009 or so. And you said you used to like to throw things a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've done some reckless driving listening to you on the radio. I'll say that. There was a couple parking lots that I pulled over just to get out and pace around my car a couple times. But
now, just putting yourself in that mindset back in those days, did you ever think in 2015 we'd be sitting in this room across from one another actually having a civil conversation?
Not without a legal mediary between us. Somebody serving as a go-between.
A lot of drinking.
Exactly. There you go. There you go.
Well, I sent you a message the other day, and I said basically what my proposal would be that Christian and I have both subjected ourselves to receive a injection of sodium pentothal or truth serum, and each of us is going to spill the weaknesses of our collective positions on faith/Christianity and atheism/evolution. So we've received that injection prior to the show, and I guess I'll kind of start the ball rolling a little bit that it bothers me a lot that there's, as a Christian, that there's certain things in the Bible that there's just, it gives too much ammunition for the disbeliever, the unbeliever, to pick at. Too many holes in it. And one of the things that bothers me right off the bat that I would like to mention is how the history of how our Bible got started.
Okay.
Obviously, the original language was Aramaic, and Hebrew, and the Bible was originally mostly written in Greek, the language of Rome. When the papacy come into power, they used a Bible called the Latin Vulgate that was written by Jerome, and that included the Apocrypha. Now we have the Septuagint, and that's Latin for just for 70 to 72 scholars. Wycliffe originally wrote a Bible in English in the 1300s. Tyndale in the 1500s. Coverdale, Miles Coverdale in 1535 actually removed the Apocrypha from the Bible. We have Matthew in 1537. We have a Taverner Bible in 1539. Then we have a Greek Bible and a Geneva Bible. Now, the Geneva Bible was very popular amongst the people. It was not authorized. The Puritans really adhered to the Geneva Bible, and the Bishop's Bible was basically the Bible of the Anglican England Church. And there was great dispute amongst these two Bibles. Well, where it gets really interesting is under King James I, the Hampton Court in the early 1600s, the king was going to have an English version of the Bible. And they broke the groups up. They had authorized groups of English, 6 groups of English translators, and they broke them up into 3 different locations, Oxford, Cambridge, and Westminster. And what bothers me about this is the king authorized any version, previous version of the Bible, to be used that they found satisfactory.
Yeah. This
and just let me say before you get going, anything that would involve the Latin Vulgate, which was basically the official Bible of the papacy, I would object to. You know, I just feel like that. I think they missed an opportunity there.
So I think the view that you're talking about is as actually fairly common in today's mainline Protestant and evangelical Protestant world, where people are somewhat trying to disassociate themselves from the Catholic Church. The history of how the Bible has been assembled is one of the most incredibly interesting things to study. The problem is, and I'm glad you brought this up, I hope on future appearances on the show that we can really dive into this. I think it's brave of you to bring it up. So I'll give you some credit there, credit where credit's due, because I think a lot of people hear any, and I won't say criticism, but any suggestion that the Bible is anything but perfect as essentially apostasy. I mean, there is a prevailing opinion today that, among many, that the Bible is perfect and that it's not to be questioned. And there are lots of problems with that. I think what you bring up, the process of how the Bible's been transmitted, how it's been translated, how it's been interpreted, how it's been assembled and disassembled and reassembled and changed over the years, is something that a lot of people pay lip service to. A lot of atheists in particular pay lip service to it. And many of them have not studied it sufficiently to actually speak to it, which is where the help of some scholars like we have at Iowa State University with Dr. Hector Avalos is very helpful. But I won't dominate the conversation, but I'll start by saying that I really am. It's interesting to me that this is something that you brought up that you wanted to discuss.
Well, I'm not a friend of the papacy. Now, I don't want to disparage any good Catholics out there that go to Mass on Saturday or Sunday. And, you know, the average Catholic person out there is generally a pretty good person. It's the hierarchy and the government of the Catholic Church that I have an issue with. And they kept people in ignorance and superstition by lack of the word, and filled their coffers at the same time through things, a false dogma such as purgatory and beggary. They literally filled their coffers on the backs of poor ignorant peasants. So Luther come along, and basically the first time Luther was ever able to see a whole copy of the Bible was when he was in the monastery. And he just devoured it like a sponge, reading by candlelight or however he could read. and come up with the conclusion that there is no vicar between us and God, that we come straight to God, and that we should have liberty of conscience to choose to whom we should serve. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of things that bother me that the Catholics have kind of kept under wraps is this idea that Mary was a perpetual virgin, mm-hmm. so that they can evoke her into sainthood, which I don't believe in immortality of the soul, so I believe that all the righteous or all the wicked are laying asleep in the graves waiting for the resurrection to life or the resurrection to death. So that's one thing that I have an issue with, is the perpetual virginity of Mary. The other thing that the Catholic Church kind of kept under wraps was the plain and simple fact that brothers and sisters of Adam and Eve had to marry to procreate the world. And that just, bothers me, because it brings up this idea that when, Cain took a wife, well, where'd this wife come from? Well, obviously it had to be one of the sisters. And, I think some of the other things that bother me about the Bible is that it doesn't specify more where the races come from. Mm-hmm. I think they all came from after Noah's flood. That's a personal opinion of mine. But there's a lot of things that the Bible leaves you short on.
So can I ask you, with regard to the message you sent me on Facebook and the direction you wanted to take the discussion today, since it's focused around what we perceive to be, if we're being completely honest, flaws in our arguments and in the logic that we so often espouse when we talk about these things with people who we're trying to convince, or when people, if we're in a heated conversation, how does your understanding of the transmission of the Bible through the years, how does your understanding of that particular topic impact how you read the Bible and your faith today?
Well, I look at it a little bit this way. God will never eliminate all ability to doubt. So I believe there's enough truth and there's enough narrative in the Bible to save you if that's what you're looking for. And if you're looking to hang yourself, I believe there's enough rope in the Bible to hang yourself. In other words, I think there's enough doubt, there's enough footholds of doubt for someone to get in and pick the book apart. I wished it wasn't that way. I wished it was a little more black and white, a little bit more, for example, Revelation, the book of Revelation. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that was allowed in the Bible on the idea that it looked like the ravings of a madman, the ravings of a lunatic. Whereas, for example, the Apocalypse of Peter, which I think we mentioned a couple weeks ago, is more straightforward and talks more about who this mark of the beast is, who the enemy is, etc. So I believe that under Constantine in the early 3rd century, that in essence, it had to make it past the censor's cut. Mm-hmm. And some of those things, if they would have been a little bit more black and white and a little bit more plain spoken, I don't think it would have gotten into the Bible. But I think God has allowed enough truth into the Bible if you seek truth.
So I think the inevitable question that somebody in my position is going to ask, and one that you've probably had to answer before, is how do you go about distinguishing truth from non-truth? What is your criteria? Because for one thing, let me start by saying this. I was really excited when you sent me that message. You and me always have fantastic conversations, often after the show goes off the air. I want to make sure. I think it's easy to take advantage of a situation like this to kind of humble brag or something. And when I go on to talk about some of the issues that I see with atheism, to try and use it as an opportunity to gloat or be self-righteous and say stupid things like, well, one of the problems is I have to deal with logic, and not everybody does that. I don't want to do that today, because I don't think that's the direction you want to take this. When you're talking about the Bible and when you are admitting that there are some of these concerns, how do you go about differentiating?
Well, we're coming upon our break, and we'll pick that question up when we return, and we'll be glad if you would rejoin us after the break. This has been View from the Pew, and I've been your host, Frank Holzhauser, and we'll be
from the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart, and it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
And thank you for rejoining us here on View from a Pew. I'm your host, Frank Holzhauser, and my guest today is returning friendly atheist, Chris John Beck. And we're being heard on The Truth 99.3, and that's powered by webcast1live.com. When we left from the break, you was asking a question and kind of rephrase or reparaphrase the question. And
Sure. In light of what you were just talking about before the break, in light of your understanding of the transmission of the Bible, how it's been done over the years, some of the problems associated with that, how do you go about today choosing which Bible to read, and after you've done that, differentiating what you believe to be divine truth from something that's been more influenced by the hand of man?
Well, what I try to do is I try to read some Bible commentary. I try to read several. If there's a real sticking point in the Bible, I try to read several different versions. Mm-hmm. I don't get so much wrapped up into the original Greek, but if something is really sticky, I will even get on a computer and try to Google the original version of the word to try to put it into context. But I would just say here on something I posted on Facebook, just a quick paragraph. As far as I know, these words you're about to hear are mine alone. I'm going to try to demonstrate to you the existence of God using simple logic and reasoning. Take a $100 bill. The Secret Service is taught to study the real bill so closely that they would know the counterfeit immediately. They're not taught to study the fake bill first. So logic would say if you want to identify the false gods, then study first and learn about the real. God first. Now, an example, there can't possibly be counterfeit Los Angeles Laker gear unless there's officially licensed gear. The word fake cannot exist without the real word. So reasoning would say that an atheist can't exist without God or a concept of God. To disbelieve in something, there has to be something to disbelieve in. And man's finite mind could not come up with the concept of good and evil on his own. Everything man knows has to have a start and a finish. So I guess one of my answers is there's a narrative of the Bible of truth in the Bible. And if you study the Bible in the spirit of really wanting it to learn and convict your life, it'll do that. But if you study it in the spirit or go at it in the spirit of doubt and skepticism and try to find holes in it, you'll find them also. Because as I said, God will never eliminate all ability to doubt. In fact, Job, God gave Job his boundaries in which Satan could attack Job. So I believe God allows Satan concessions and footholds in the Bible for Satan to plead his case and make his case that, hey, this book is baloney.
Okay, so there's a lot to tackle there. I think you might have just hit on about 3 more episodes worth of stuff. So let me start out with this. When you're saying that, when you use the analogy of the Secret Service being taught to recognize counterfeit from the real thing right away, what is your objective standard? What is your litmus test that you're judging the word against? What version of the Bible, what interpretation, what translation?
Well, you would agree that all knowledge that we have is collective knowledge, whether we're an atheist or a Christian. All knowledge, none of us know anything that we haven't read or seen or heard.
Okay.
So we're all relying on such things as Plato, Socrates, Greek mythology. We rely on the Bible. It's all collective hand-me-down information. Mm-hmm. It's which knowledge gives a more accurate portrayal of what's going on in life, which gives the more explanations to the things that we,
So the way that I interpret what you just said, though, is that everything is subjective.
Well, I believe that here's one of the things, and let me let toss this out to you, and then you come back at me with something that is a hole in your thing. But the problem that I see your side or your atheistic side has is how do you deal with moral absolutes versus moral relativity? In other words, if everything is just relative, I had a little story here that I'd like to share with you. There was an atheist and a Christian talking. And the Christian was saying that all morals come from God. The atheist responded by saying, well, morals come from custom and culture, and what is right to one man is morals. And so the Christian retorts by saying, well, in some cultures, it is by moral code, it's that you love your neighbor. In other cultures, it's okay to eat your neighbor. Which do you prefer? It's all by moral code. It's all by custom. It's all by culture. So that's where we get into this debate of relativity. Who's to say whose value judgment we rely on? Because value judgments, as Thomas Paine was saying, is a moving target. No generation should be subjected to the value judgments, the morality of a previous generation. So I would say that's one of the flaws in your argument as an atheist.
It's certainly one of the ones that people bring up. That's not one of the things that I perceive as a flaw, simply because, so the issue of morality is really difficult to deal with, but I think that this idea that to a certain extent things are subjective is something that we all experience just as a matter of living. Just as a matter of being alive, the idea that that you can establish some kind of objective moral truth, I think is illusory. People will say that you find that in Christianity, or you find that in the Bible. But one of the things that you find with the Bible is that it goes back and forth on some of these issues. There isn't, even by the standard of the quote objective source of the Bible, there are contradictions that make it very difficult to determine what is what. I think some of the more, what I perceive as the problem with atheism, the problem with talking to people and having this discussion with people, is that atheists do not have for the most part, I mean, it depends, but for the most part, atheists do not have the luxury of being able to speak in absolutes, which goes to what you're saying. We can't speak in certainty. It's just not something we can do. And that's mostly just a relic of the way the world works. I mean, that's just, there's no quicker way for a wise person to look stupid than to start speaking in absolutes. But people desire the peace and the comfort that comes with certainty, and that comes with a belief that there is some kind of absolute out there. It's less work if somebody can just tell you what to do, and you do it. That is a much easier standard to live by than having to figure it out for yourself as you go.
Well, let me share with something I posted on your Facebook page, and I hope you get some comments from it. But this is something I wrote back in July of 2012, I believe. It's called Moral Absolutes. Mm-hmm. I decided to get drunk today and pop my other in the kisser. Des Moines or Polk County sends out one of their finest to visit. Oh, let's say Officer Tom Van Bali. Tom is a heck of a swell guy, but he's ready in a heartbeat to throw you on the ground and twist your arm like a pretzel and then say you resisted his arrest. So I get the ride, the elevator drunk ride, down at the Des Moines police station. You know, the old-timers know the one. But wait, old brother Tom Van Bali may have popped his woman last night, or heck, may have held her hostage with a gun to his or her head. Maybe some of his fellow bros on the force knew of his home issues, but, well, that's beside the point. So I get hauled before the Honorable Joseph A. Joker at trial. Judge Joker holds my freedom in his hands. Well, let's say I was in contempt of his courtroom and he decides to throw the book at me with the maximum loud. So a few years later, pass by, I'm sitting in a prison cell, and I have on the tube Dr. Phil. Doc happens to have on Judge Joker's two kids, who says that they were molested by the Honorable Judge Joker since their early childhood. Judge passed away a few years ago, and maybe it's revealed that the Judgy Wudgy's wife now receives Judge Joker's pension and knew full well of the closet skeletons, possibly even like Nick Cage's movie 8mm, the Honorable Judge Joker had funded several snuff films found in his private library that he would show to some of his fellow bench judges during the summer barbecues just for sexual kicks and giggles. Hey, what's a few dead illegals among friends? Okay, so Mr. Atheist with no moral absolutes, the people in whom the government put in charge with full faith and credit of this society determine my fate and freedom, both deserve punishment more severe than mine, with no dead right or wrong, no dead right or dead wrong. Why should I subject myself to their value judgments, considering that secular humanism teaches that there's no God, and everything came from nothing, a creation theory taught with no basis or foundation? Where is my justice? If there's no moral absolutes, there cannot be any justice. Without God, there is no ultimate justice.
So part of that's just true. I mean, as problematic as that is to hear, this idea for absolute justice or eternal justice, I think is largely illusory. But I think more to what you're talking about, I think we all, as a matter of living together and as a matter of existing within a society together, experience things like entering into social contracts with each other and empathy, and we understand that nobody's morality is perfect and there's going to be problems. Why is it that you think, if I could ask, why do you think that morality or justice is owed to humanity? And where do you see evidence of that?
Well, I would answer your question with this question. If Darwin is right and we come from primate, then why don't we live by survival of the fittest, eat or be eaten. That's the law. That's the law of the jungle. So how did we evolve enough to lay down this set of rules and regulations to prevent anarchy? All societies have them. Even Egypt had them. They had laws against lying and stealing. And, you know, when Israel came out of Egypt, the only thing that would have been new to them would have been the first 4 commandments about the relationship between God and man. All societies have had laws that regulate interaction between human beings. You steal something from somebody, there has to be a cost to it, right?
So then what makes you think that any of this is absolute? If this is something that predates the law, what makes you think that this is somehow absolute? This is something that man has passed on for a long time. But I think, for one thing, let me wait for a second here before we get onto that. Evolution and the theory of natural selection, survival of the fittest, which is a later term, but that is not something that is a moral code. That is only about the evolution of species. That has nothing to do with man's moral code. I think that's a misunderstanding of evolution. Do you understand evolution to be something that should impact our moral code?
Well, we're coming upon our break, and we'll answer that. We'll delve into that question when we get back. This has been View from a Pew. Pardon me. That's my show on Friday evening. And I'm your host, Frank Holzhauser, and my guest today is Chris John Beck, and this is being heard on The Truth 99.3. And that's powered by webcast1live.com. And when we come back, we will take up Chris John's question.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Homs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're gonna make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money back guarantee on what we do. What type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
Well, the time is definitely flying here. We're halfway through our show here on View from the Pew. I'm your host, Frank Holzhauser, and my guest today is our returning atheist friend, Chris John Beck, and we're being heard on The Truth 99.3, powered by Webcast One Live. When we went away to break, Christian was asking a question. He don't know if he remembers the exact question, but try to paraphrase it.
Sure. I think it's something you and me or continue to talk about off air, and I think it's a good question to lead us on to the last little bit of the hour that we have here, which is, and this is one of the problems that I think as I was discussing with atheism, which is we don't deal in absolutes. It's very comforting to think that there is some kind of eternal justice out there, so that in the hypothetical that you suggested, there would be some kind of retribution or some kind of justice for somebody who seems to have gotten away with something terrible. But do you think that simply because something makes you feel better, that it is necessarily true?
No, we're not supposed to base our, as W.K. Clifford said, the British philosopher, we're not supposed to base anything, on flimsy evidence. Even a correct view, we're supposed to have evidence to support any view we have.
So then what is your evidence that the Bible provides some kind of objective moral compass, or that there is some kind of ultimate justice that is offered through the Bible?
Well, because one of the things I believe, like gold, should back our monetary system. Without something, gold, fossil fuel, something to back our monetary system, our paper would be basically worthless. Mm-hmm. So I believe that the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights is all based on the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue. While we're not supposed to, God doesn't want us, for example, to, or we have chosen, we don't want an official religion, or we don't want an official combination of church and state. We want the freedom to worship and as we choose. But the laws are basically,
So there was a treaty that was passed that was written at the end of George Washington's first administration. It was signed by John Adams. The United States was at war with the Barbary states of northern Africa, and there was a treaty signed called the Treaty of Tripoli. In it explicitly states, as the United States is in no way, as the government of the United States is in no way based on the Christian faith. It's a fairly explicit reference. What do you think that they were lying when they wrote that?
But I would ask you a question. Where does these concepts of right and wrong come from? We're told that God is Alpha and Omega, without beginning and end. It must be accepted by faith and not logic. Here's the point you must understand. The mere concept of God cannot exist without a real God. Conversely, any concept of evil can't exist without evil. For instance, a vampire does not exist in reality, but it's based loosely on the concept of evil. And Satan, Lucifer, is the father of all evil. Every word in the dictionary relies on every other word for meaning. Light cannot possibly exist without darkness, which is going to bring up the inevitable question, did then God create evil? No. God created choice, and within choice demands the possibility of rejection. Inside the boundaries of rejection lies the evil, or the potential of evil, and evil eventually leads to sin and rebellion. I have read that sin is such an enigma that to merely try to explain it is an effort to justify it. I hope in these words I'm not guilty of trying to justify evil, but again to emphasize, for God so loved this world. That's what I base my whole, the 7-day week, the fact that we have, there's no other explanation for the week except for the story of creation. Why do we still observe the 7-day week? It has nothing to do with our methods of keeping time. We keep time based on the lunar year, the lunar months. 7 divides into 28 a whole lot better than it divides into 29, 30, or 31. So nature tells us that there's God. The Word tells us there's God. The prophets tell us there's God. And then, to me, the creation week tells us that there's a God because He instructed us to worship or to rest on the seventh day and worship Him.
But men have come up with all kinds of things and all kinds of God. Is it your position that no belief can come into being without some truth to back that belief? Is every belief, I mean, when you say something like you started off, you were reading from something that you'd written there, when you say something like atheism cannot exist without the existence of a God, light can't exist without dark, and similar, do you believe that a belief in something cannot exist without some underlying truth to that belief?
Well, for example, like I just mentioned,
just real quick, let's make sure we stay on topic here because I know there's other things you want to get to.
I want to talk about a dictionary. A word relies on every other word for explanation. So in a dictionary, an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God. Well, if God has to exist in the dictionary for an atheist not to believe in it.
A concept of God.
Concept of God, yes.
A concept of God. But are all concepts realistic? Are all concepts real?
They have to come from something. Where are they coming from?
So Allah, unicorns, goblins, are these all real?
No, but I think they're variations. Supposedly, like Hercules is a variation of Samson in the Bible. Greek mythology has stories of a flood, kind of like the Noah's flood. I mean, there's things that all loosely based on concepts that are already previously in the Bible.
But there are all kinds of concepts that we can interpret, and people have interpreted as God without it being the Christian God. So what you've logically established is that there is some base concept that people have, which I accept, but to jump from that somehow to it is the Christian God is not a logical leap.
Well, we've got about 2 minutes left in this segment and 8 in the next. So we got a couple things we want to hit, and so I want you to hit on here quickly a flaw in atheism.
So I think like any philosophical idea or like any group of people, there's flaws to everything. I think our ability to admit and talk about it is something that would make all of us better. I think so. In particular, when it comes to atheism, a flaw is that we don't have answers for everything. We don't have answers for things like, from an atheistic worldview, what started the universe? How did life begin? These aren't questions we have answers to, which is very disconcerting to a lot of people that we can't answer these things. Science is working on it, and a lot of people seek the certainty of something like religious faith that tells you, even though it's just an assertion, where these things began. Atheism can't offer that, and that's problematic for a lot of people. There are a lot of people who do not deal well with having to say, I don't know to something, who just don't feel comfortable with something as important as the beginning of the universe or the meaning of life or the beginning of life, saying, I simply don't know. And for a lot of people, that's a catching point that will forever prevent them from considering atheism because that's uncomfortable.
So what you're saying is science can't prove everything.
Science hasn't proven everything, but science isn't in the business of proving things. What science does isn't establish certainty. What science deals in is probabilities and in levels of certainty.
Let me ask you a question. Does any atheist come at this from the angle that they want God proven to them scientifically?
I think there's a lot of people that talk about that, but theoretically at least, it should be possible. I mean, if God manifests himself in reality, we should be able to measure that in some kind of way. Now, establishing supernatural causation lends itself to an entirely different set of problems. But yeah, I think there are people that say it would be nice if we could prove God scientifically.
If there is such a thing as a God, and he did create this entire universe, do you think that he could walk in and out of those rules if he pleased to do so?
Yes.
Okay. We have one last segment when we return, and I want to save that for the topic of eternal damnation. And this has been, frankly speaking, or this has been View from a Pew. I keep thinking of my own show. And it's on the Truth Network, 99.3, powered by Webcast One Live. And we'll be glad if you return with us after the break.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah!
If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hey, psst. Let me let you in on a little secret. You ready? Always try to do business with people, not places. Especially if you seek honest Christian business people. And when it comes to my car, I really need to trust who's working on it. Now, my family is so blessed. A few years ago, we found a family-owned automobile repair shop that operates as a Christian business also. Open, honest, reliable, trustworthy. It's AMCO on Hickman Road in front of Kmart. And it's a family-owned Christian operating business. This family treats your car as if it was their car. Everything from oil changes to transmission repair and everything in between. So the next time you feel the need to be at peace with your choice of who you can trust with your car, give AMCO on Hickman a chance to serve you. And tell them Max sent you.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you sit in the back pew or the front pew, it's your voice we want to hear. The phone lines are open, so call 244-0077. Now, here's J. Michael McCoy.
And we're back with The View from a Pew. I'm your host, Frank Holzhauser, and our guest today is our returning guest, Christian Beck. And we're being heard on the Truth 99.3, powered by Webcast One Live. For our final segment, Christian, I want you to slide on your Christian hat because you come from a Christian background.
Mm-hmm.
Your father and your grandfather are both Presbyterian pastors, I understand.
Yep.
Here's a question I'd like to ask you before we get into eternal damnation. Christ in Eden counseled our first parents, Adam and Eve, to not eat of a certain tree in the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Why would he go to the effort to warn the first pair not to eat of that tree if they did not have the moral capacity to go and do exactly what he just told them not to do? Because I think you would understand Christianity a lot better and understand me if you understood this concept of freedom of choice. I'm a moral free agent, and and then how this pertains to judgment of these free moral beings, and ultimately how God is going to judge them, whether it's going to be a universalism, whether it's going to be eternal damnation, or whether it's going to be a judgment and a fire and a cleansing of the earth before the earth is made new. Well,
sliding on my Christian hat for a second, I would say this. I'll go back to my Presbyterian roots. I will appeal to Calvin and say, I do not read in the Bible free will. That's not the Presbyterian interpretation, or at least, I mean, if you're talking about a strict Calvinist, I shouldn't speak for all Presbyterians, especially as an atheist, but the idea that we are moral free agents and that we have the free will to choose, and that God gave us this capacity for whatever reasons were His and His alone, is difficult to support biblically. There are some things that people turn to. I used to do a lot of digging for that myself because I liked the idea of free will. but free will very much is up in the air, biblically speaking.
Well, in interest of time, I want to hit this last topic that I want to get to, and it's the topic of eternal hell, eternal damnation, eternal fire, eternal torment, whatever you want to call it. I soundly reject this doctrine as false, and I believe that this doctrine, we got into it a little bit a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about some Urbandale students that had killed themselves, and it offended you quite a bit that, I think it should have been just left at their fate is sealed, to the good or to the bad, one way or the other. And I think it offends a lot of people, and I think this turns more people into infidels, skeptics of the Bible, than it brings to the Bible the doctrine of eternal torment. And the alternative of universalism is just as bad, that in essence, God's going to ultimately in the end save everybody. There is going to be no judgment. So my belief is there's going to be a judgment. There's going to be a fire. It's going to be a fire of mercy, a cleansing fire. The fire will be out, and God will build the new earth upon the ashes of the wicked, not hot coals. So is this the thing? Is this the biggest hang-up for, I know it was for Robert Ingersoll.
It certainly is a hang-up. The idea of eternal torment and hellfire and essentially believe at the point of a sword. It's a believe or burn is certainly a hang-up. It's something that scares a lot of people away, but it's supported biblically. You have Revelation 21:8. You have 2 Thessalonians 1:8 through 9, Mark 9:47 through 48, and that's just a few off the top of my head that thoroughly support the idea of burning in hell after death. And I mean, we can get back into the idea of biblical interpretation and biblical translation and transmission with where this idea of hell even came from, because a huge part of it is a relic of a translation problem between the Greek and the ancient Hebrew. But it is supported biblically. Paul talked about it. Peter talked about it. Jesus talked about it.
What would you call somebody who kills someone with a gun or stabs somebody with a knife, and it's proven after they were dead they were stabbed repeatedly about 100 times after they had already perished? What would you say to that crime? You'd say that was a crime of passion, be a crime of overkill, be a crime of be a sadistic crime. But yet we're supposed to believe this loving, merciful God that loves you so much that he died for you, if you don't choose him, is going to torment you eternally through the ages, forever, ever, and ever. Samuel Hopkins, a Calvinist preacher, once said in the 1800s that the fire bellowing out of an eternal torment is going to rise as incense to give joy to the righteous in heaven, paraphrasing that a little bit. But those two things, that's just about as 180 degrees polar opposite from one another that one can get.
But that happens a lot. That happens a lot with the Bible. Would you acknowledge that what you're rejecting is supported by Scripture?
Well, I think that, no. I believe that there's things that's, for example, you mentioned Mark 49 and 50.
Mark 9:47 through 48.
Right, but I would go on to have you read 49 to 50, talking about the salt and the salt sacrifice, and basically salt preserves, and I would say that this fire that is referenced there is a refining fire and a preserving fire to preserve the righteous in the sanctification process.
That's an interesting translation. The text itself reads, "And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye than having two eyes to be cast into the hellfire, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched." The discussions of fire and burning in the New Testament are not talked about in a preservation sense.
Well, fire is, God is always found in Scripture, in fire, in smoke, and we're coming up to the end of our show, and sadly, this show has went way too fast. We're going to have to have you back in. But I would say that this is a preserving fire. The worm that dieth not is that sin that keeps attaching itself to you. Better to enter in without that than to not, better to enter into heaven. Better, to cut your hand off and offend ye.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as a preservation fire, a refining fire that God is molding you, fitting you in His image, in His likeness, in His perfection. And it's this process of sanctification that is doing it. I believe that's what that verse is speaking to.
And like I said, that's an interesting interpretation. It goes against most of mainline Protestant belief, most of evangelical belief, and all of Catholic belief. It's interesting, but I think it's hard to support with the text.
Well, we'll pick this conversation up on another day. We want to thank you and appreciate you joining us today here on View from the Pew, and that's heard on 99.3 The Truth, powered by Webcast One Live. And Mac and I both love this job and couldn't do it without you. And when